Welcome back, curious fear thinkers. Let's dive right into this explainer because today we're looking at something absolutely fascinating. Why our beautifully complex, incredibly capable human brains fall for the exact same historical and scientific myths just over and over again. We aren't just looking at the facts today. We are looking at us, at the wonderfully human reasons why we believe the things we believe.
Think about it for a second. How many deeply guarded myths is your brain protecting right now, completely without you even realizing it? Like, did Christopher Columbus really have to prove the Earth was round to a room full of dogmatic flat earthers? Or, hey, do we humans actually only use 10% of our brains, leaving this massive reserve of untapped genius just waiting to be unlocked?
Well, as our sources for this explainer reveal, the truth is just wild. And what this quote perfectly captures is that falling for these stories doesn't mean we're foolish. Not at all. It simply means we are uniquely, wonderfully human. We are a storytelling species, right? Our minds crave narratives that make the world feel organized, dramatic, and emotionally satisfying. So let's start by looking at how our natural human love for a good, dramatic story completely rewrites our history.
Section 1. Drama over historical facts. Why reality isn't cinematic enough.
Take the classic Columbus myth. We absolutely love the idea of a lone, rational hero standing up to an ignorant establishment. But the intellectual class in the 1490s? Yeah, they already knew perfectly well that the Earth was a sphere. The ancient Greeks figured that out. The real dispute was literally just math. Columbus got the math wrong by confusing Arabic miles with shorter Italian miles, which made him think Asia was much closer than it actually was. The scholars weren't flat earthers at all, they were just better at geometry.
And this brilliantly illustrates how a myth evolves over time. It's like a giant game of telephone. That whole Flat Earth Council was actually a romantic fiction, completely invented by the American author Washington Irving in 1828. Then, in the late 19th century, that completely fabricated story was weaponized by academics to push the conflict thesis. That's this false, highly dramatic narrative that science and religion have always been locked in an eternal heroic struggle. We literally wrote a movie script over the actual history simply because it felt better.
And, we do the exact same thing with our villains. Marie Antoinette never actually said her infamous, cold-hearted line, "Let them eat cake." It was a pre-existing literary phrase published by the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau when Marie Antoinette was only 10 years old, but she was deeply unpopular. So society basically pasted that cruel quote onto her because it perfectly fit the story they already wanted to tell about out-of-touch royals.
We even sanitize the uncomfortable truths of our heroes, too. We all learn that quirky, folksy story of George Washington's wooden teeth, right? But the historical reality is pretty grim. His dentures were actually crafted from gold, lead, hippopotamus ivory, and, tragically, human teeth, likely purchased from the enslaved or impoverished. We collectively prefer the myth of simple wooden teeth because the complex reality of 18th century dental prosthetics and slavery is just a bit too uncomfortable for our cultural narrative. Now, what's really interesting about this next shift is how our brains project our own human social anxieties onto the animal kingdom. Because we don't just humanize history, we totally humanize nature.
Section 2. Projecting humanity onto animals. Seeing ourselves in the wild.
So we're looking at a phenomenon called anthropomorphic projection. It's a very clinical term for a deeply emotional habit. We constantly try to validate our own human hierarchies, our own hygiene habits, and our own power struggles by forcing them onto animals. We look at the wild and we basically just see a mirror of ourselves, which causes some incredibly deep scientific misunderstandings.
There is honestly no better example of this than the alpha wolf. It is a massive cultural touchstone. But that classic dominance theory, it was based entirely on observing a group of highly stressed, unrelated wolves shoved together in captivity in the 1940s. That's kind of like studying humans in a prison and assuming that's just how natural human society operates. In reality, wild wolf packs are just cooperative family units. The alphas are simply the parents leading their kids.
Biologist David Mech, who accidentally popularized the alpha myth decades ago, gives us a deeply humanized look at scientific vulnerability. He realized his early work was wrong based on new evidence in the wild, and he spent years trying to undo his own famous concept. This frames scientific self-correction not as some humiliating failure, but as an absolute superpower. I mean, it takes profound human courage to say, hey, I was wrong, let's learn the truth together.
Our need for a dramatic, human-like narrative in nature is so overpowering that cinematic illusions are still accepted as biological fact today. Like lemmings do not commit mass suicide. That entire concept comes from Disney's 1958 documentary White Wilderness, where filmmakers actually staged the footage by pushing lemmings off a cliff. The imagery was so gripping, so tragically cinematic, that our brains just filed it away as a scientific fact. Let's move over to our own biology and see how this builds into an almost hopeful deception. We are absolutely obsessed with the illusions of our own bodies, constantly searching for hidden potential.
Section 3. The illusions of our bodies. The search for hidden potential.
This brings us to perhaps the most beloved myth of the whole bunch, the idea that we only use 10% of our brains. Modern brain scans definitively prove we use our entire brain, with almost every part active even when we're fast asleep. The brain is just way too metabolically expensive to sit there doing nothing. So why on earth does this myth survive? Well, because it offers the deeply emotionally satisfying promise that we all possess untapped, superhero-like potential just waiting to be unleashed. We believe it because we want to be limitless.
And we fall for routine biological illusions every single day too. We mistakenly believe shaving makes hair grow back thicker, simply because the blunt tip of a cut hair literally just feels coarser to our touch. We warn people that cracking knuckles causes arthritis. Even though there's absolutely no clinical link, it just sounds unpleasant, so we assume it must be bad for us. And we blame sugar for hyperactivity in kids entirely due to confirmation bias. We only remember the wild birthday parties, right? Not the quiet afternoons after they had a candy bar. So the crucial takeaway here is that our brains, as incredible as they are naturally quite bad at grasping massive scales and random probabilities. We're wired for the immediate, tangible world around us.
Which leads us to Section 4, why our brains trick us, misunderstanding scale and probability.
Just look at the Great Wall of China. It's a marvel, but it's way too narrow, and its colors blend far too perfectly into the landscape to be seen from space with the naked eye. Yet, driven by immense national pride and a sheer awe at human engineering, humanity started claiming you could see it from space back in the 18th century. We imagined this romantic idea centuries before spaceflight even existed, purely because we desperately wanted human achievement to be visible to the cosmos.
And because we fundamentally misunderstand randomness, our brain assumes that if a rare event happens, it surely won't repeat immediately. This leads to the incredibly dangerous, mathematically flawed myth that lightning never strikes the same place twice. In reality, lightning frequently strikes the same place. Tall structures like the Empire State Building get hit dozens of times a single year. Our intuition about probability is honestly just a comforting illusion. Okay, let's pull all of this together for our Curious Fear community. What does all this mean for us as learners?
Section 5. Stay curious, stay human. The beauty of self-correction.
First off, give yourself some grace. It is perfectly normal to have believed these myths. We are all dealing with cognitive inertia. This is basically the tendency of our society to cling tightly to stories that make the world feel safe, dramatic, or simple, especially once those stories become part of our everyday vocabulary. Changing a cultural belief takes immense time, because you aren't just changing a fact, you are rewriting a story that people really love.
So here is our game plan. We can accept our shared psychological blind spots, knowing that we all naturally want to project human traits onto wolves or believe we have secret brain powers. We can actively choose to value complex realities over simple, cinematic drama. And most importantly, we can fully embrace the humility of scientific self-correction. Separating fact from fiction isn't about feeling foolish. It's about valuing the empathy, curiosity, and courage it takes to actually update our beliefs when we learn something new.
As you continue to explore this fascinating world with us here at Curious Fear, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The next time you hear a compelling piece of trivia, just pause for a second and ask yourself, are the facts you cling to actually true, or are they simply the stories your beautifully human brain desperately wants to hear? Keep questioning, keep learning, and as always, stay wonderfully curious.